All right, so back to this. Yeah, I mean it's been a couple days since I've played this game. Let's just load in because we know that what would you call it? We're gonna try to get that secret cutscene, which we might not even get because the last few times we tried we weren't able to. But again, yeah, it's been a few days since I've been able to play this. I was on 24-hour duty yesterday, right? So unfortunately, I wasn't able to. Yeah, I mean, so now my sleep schedule's fucked, but it is what it is. I just got unlucky with having it like within 2 weeks of each other, so it is what it is. And then the day before, I did all the tier list videos. The Amoy one, the Yik one, and then the Insurgents one. I was quite surprised I was surprised there's even a Yik character tier list, even though I didn't know like half the characters on there, right? But again, that's kind of besides the point. We're gonna go till like 5 minutes. If we don't get anything by that point, we're just gonna get into it again with this whole secret cutscene shit. I guess for us, the big thing in when it comes to this game and as applied to this game, what we figured out is that it's basically chronological from the ground up. The numbers themselves don't really matter. So we're just again gonna treat it as such, so we can kind of get a piece of story together as it's been going on, right? So we're at site what 6, and there are like 23 within or level 6, and there are I think like 23 within site A. So we're just gonna go bottom top from site whatever you would call it, in site A, and then we'll move on to site B and do the same thing. I guess the big thing is we'll rewatch the movies. But yeah, I mean, because those are like, I mean, no reason not to, right? But and then hopefully, through the big thing is yeah, so we've got upwards of like four different things that we can be going through. We've got the psychiatry, the diagnosis, we've got the actual counseling sessions, Lane's diary, Toko's diary, which Toko's diary cuts off at some point. As we can suspect, her and Takeshi are seeming to have a falling through, right? But and then along with that, the movies themselves. So yeah, the big thing there is just kind of like again, it's just something where yeah, it's not exactly going so hot for them, but yeah, I don't know why we haven't been getting any more secret hidden cutscenes. Like maybe it was only at the start. I don't know. Maybe once we reach a certain point, we just don't get them anymore. Who knows? But again, I find like because here's the thing. Obviously, I watched the show. Funny enough, now I'm just watching all the memes about it. But I honestly think like the game, like this game, is better than the show itself. Like, because I feel like the show is focused on much more of like it's similar, to like Yick in a sense, to where God, I hate that I'm making this comparison where Yick focuses on like abstract metaphysical like bullshit as opposed to having a concrete like tangible storyline with character progression and development. Lain is kind of like that in a way. Granted, it's not to that level to where it's like they just destroy any chance of like, having a coherent story and character development and progress. Because we do see that in Lain, right? Specifically, obviously, Lain herself, but even certain like other characters involved, right? They actually go through character progression development. Crazy and wild concept, right? But then also there is again, there is somewhat of a coherent storyline, right? The big thing is you just gotta take a lot of what it gets thrown at your way as face value and like, oh, this probably isn't actually happening right now. It's through a flawed lens or perspective. So but I feel like the game, and then this is focused specifically much more on obviously the direct, development and progression of Lane's character, right? I mean, is it's basically every single, pretty nearly every single module is about her. Along with that, it's also telling like a coherent story rather than focusing on the whole wired shenanigans, right? So granted, I'm not sure if the wired's gonna again, and the big question we have with this game is how what I suspect is this is some alternate parallel reality. Or probably just honestly they decide to go in a different direction for the show and we're kind of able to fully realize that versus where this was kind of like a stepping stone. But it is something where it's like, again, actually, we do know that there is connection between this and the show because we do know from the most recent modules that Lain has been hearing voices coming from the wires, the telephone poles running through the streets, and that she also feels like she has kind of another version of herself in her within her that she's battling, which we know is like her evil self, right? Or her non-innocent self. So the version that comes out when she's on the wired. So and we did see through some of the movies that the inner at least what would you call technology still plays a pretty big role, but it doesn't seem to be like the main primary focus as opposed to like how heavy of a role it had in the show. But again, with that, let's just go into right diagnosis client, and then this is 15.
主に言語現地の症状に関して話をし、電線から声が聞こえることが、俗に言う電波系と呼ばれるものだ。聞こえる話の内容は本人に関連がない被害妄想。物理的影響妄想と分類されるべき内容だが、妄想と呼べるほどの発達した症状。電話線や無線電波が具体的な声として変換されて聞こえるという子供らしい理屈付けをすることに成立している現象であり、頭が良く、感受性の強い小児に見られる工作の幻覚と言えるだろう。しかし、幻覚症状が日中に起こることに関しては、極めて普通である。特に、クライアントが嘘をついているとは思えないが、小児の場合、友人と話していく最中に幻覚状態になるケースが極めて稀である。おそらくは、時間や状況の記憶が本人の中で曖昧になり、別な体験と混同しているか、もしくは友人と話していた夢を見ていたのかもしれない。
Okay, a couple interesting things. I think the first thing is the reference to her friend specifically because obviously, in the show she has her school friends. She seems to have only one real like friend in this, and that's the dude she talks with over the internet, which we see in the movies later on. So her friends, they could either, I guess, it's not distinguished between, okay, real life friends or like imaginary friends that we know she has, right? So it's like, that's the first thing. The second thing is, again, and I find this kind of interesting, is besides the fact that, I guess, given that we kind of now know a bit about Toko outside of since we read her diary, her journal entries, stuff like that, we know a bit about her outside of these dialogues and or these diagnoses and then counselings, right? Again, it's interesting that she can like kind of at least like even though she's kind of disillusioned with her work, at least is again invest in Lane. But it's also something that's interesting to where it seems like it seems like it's something to where she's or Toko is actively like trying to I don't want to say avoid, but kind of what would you call it? Actively trying to downplay kind of what Lane is going through and what's been going on. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, what Lane says is 100% a matter of fact, right? Granted, we know because again, a flawed perception, but something where it seems like Toka's like just again trying to like downplay it and or like redirect it into something else. And I think part of that is because honestly, I still think she doesn't really have any idea, what's going on, right? But you can't really blame her, right? This is I feel like Lane's a very special case scenario client if you had to deal with that. If I was a fucking psychiatrist or therapist and I had Lane as a client, I'd probably, fucking fail, right? Like, let's be real here. But again, it's something that's interesting there because I think it really like manifests itself because again, just the amount of like grasping at straws, right? It seems like she talks about a different thing every single time when it comes down to this. So, you know. And again, since it's chronological, we can just go, we can just fucking also I don't know why the theme is like this, but Playing this on my totally legit PS1. All right, let's go. This is lab 15. But of course, we know the counselings are ahead of the diagnoses. So
調子はどう？うん。大丈夫だよ。京子さんは？うん。相変わらずってとこね。もうちょっと落ち着いて考える時間が欲しいってとこかな。忙しいの？ちょっとね。これじゃあ立場が逆ね。レインにカウンセリングしてもらってるみたい。あ、ところで、日記はどうすることですか？うん、いいことにした。そう。よかった。給料日前の出費は。
raw.
いいんだわ。何？嘘よ、冗談。これでも先生は結構もらってるんだから。
Bitch, you better, you have a fucking doctorate.
直したりすぎる気がするけど。ない自分の愚痴ばっかだよね。でも先生おかしい。なんか、さあ、始めましょうか。この間の続きなんだけどね。自我ってことは、学校で習ったでしょ？前に調べたとき覚えた。自分は自分であるって認識すること？そう。レインたちの年頃には、それが結構不安定になることがあるの。自分って一体何者なんだろうってね。男の子とかだと、実は自分はヒーローで。
Bitch, that's me. I'm a fucking superhuman.
とか、女の子だったら、実は私は今のうちの子じゃなくて、
Wait, hey, hey, whoa, whoa, whoa,
去
hold
る
on.
大学の令状で、白馬に乗った王子様が執事と共に迎えに来るとか、本気で信じちゃった。私はそんな風に思ってないよ。私は私は本当に。でも、自分のことって、意外に自分ではわからないものじゃないし。先生も昔は本当はもっと違う自分がいて、今の私は違ってるって思ってた時があったけどな。違う自分？そうね。例えば、嫌なこととかあった時に、なんで私がこんな目に遭うのか、何か間違ってるって思ってた。いつか真実の自分に帰れるような気がしてね。それとね、地震が起こっても私だけは助かっちゃうとか、どこかで自分が特別で選ばれた存在なんじゃないかなって思ってた。つまり、ありもしない自分を想像してたの。おかしいでしょ？私は選ばれた人だなんて思ってないよ。普通でいいんだもん。
Okay, I think this, I say this every time. And this is probably one of the most interesting ones we've got, specifically because of how much it tells us about Toka, right? Again, probably the first thing is, again, and what she's been saying at the end, kind of going through her own experience when she was younger, right? And again, kind of how she thought that there was a different version of herself or whatever you would call it. Again, I think that's very interesting. And again, it goes with the whole saying that, a lot of like therapists and psychiatrists, psychologists, or whatever, there's a lot of self-awareness on their aspect. And again, it's a self-selecting thing to where it's something to where it's like, a lot of people who suffer from those problems end up going to work in those fields because, they just know about it, right? And they've dealt with it. So again, I feel like that's something very interesting about her there, that she's, again, well, not really going through the same thing, but the fact that Lane again, kind of feels like she has this other person, she's dealing with, right? And then Toka can kind of open up and relate. Granted, again, it's different, different it's still different, right? But again, it's something that she can at least relate to. Or like, what would you call it? Grasp onto nonetheless, right? And then along with that, probably at the beginning, her talking about Lane arguably being her like therapist, and her, Toka opening up about Lain, like kind of, stating her like grievances regarding her work, and then also that she's like busy because we know this is the time she's kind of having a falling out with Takeshi via her own logs. So it's like, again, it's very interesting because obviously, people say keep work and personal life separate, but the problem being, or was it, keep your professional life and your play life separate. There's a quote along those lines, but that's quite frankly an impossible task. They bleed into each other, and what happens in one affects you and what you do in the other. So again, it's just something there to where it's like, I think we're kind of seeing this now. I think we got glimpses of it, but now we're starting to kind of see it actually come out to where like again, Toka's kind of struggles, right? As you know, because I can let's put it this way. Okay, I very much enjoyed high school. I very much enjoyed college. Granted, that's all I've got, right? Bachelor's is my highest level degree, and it's not in a STEM field. It's in fucking LAS, government and public policy, right? So very much not a grindy, degree, right? So in most again, the job I hold right now in my current line of work is independent from my degree. So again, for me, the big thing is like I those were very much enjoyable experiences for me. And again, they quite frankly don't really have that much of an impact on my career versus someone like Toka who 27 god cuz I'm what? I turned 23 in less than a month. Actually, in only like a few weeks. So Toka, there's basically about as much age gap between Toka and me as me and my younger brother. So I mean, it puts things in perspective. But it's like she's what 27 with a doctorate on a very grindy, like degree, right? What was it like psychology or whatever her degree type is. I guess not pure STEM, but still, something that you need to put work into, right? And her career is very much tied to that. And especially again, something mean to where like, her current work or job isn't exactly the most, I guess, forgiving in terms of like, okay, she's working under some boss she doesn't like, it feels like she doesn't get paid enough. Hmm. But can't really get out of it, right? Because it's part of it's so inherently tied to her, degree, like her or her career, right? It's like again, so someone like if I were in her position, I'd be pretty pissed, right? Because it's like I put in all this work, and I'm still getting treated like dog shit, right? Basically. So we see that, and again, I think it's something to where it's a combination of things. The fact that she's so young and green, the fact that she's kind of going through a rough time in terms of her work, as well as her personal life and relationship with Takeshi. Lain as a client, not only being her first client, but just kind of fundamentally who she is. I feel like Lain is a person, not like intentionally, but just kind of who she is and the level of self awareness she has. It's something to where she can kind of inadvertently end up manipulating Toka on her end. So it's something to where, again, recipe for disaster. Oh, we got a new lab. Hold on. Yeah, I was like, we got a new lab phone. So this is what, 16? Yeah, let's do this.
そうね。それは多分、
Sold
弱さ
on.
先生は弱かった。それで、そう思うことで逃げてたんだと今は思ってる。私も自分から逃げてるそうは思わないわ。ただ自分を変えたいって思ってるでしょ変な夢を見なくしたいだけ。だと思う。ひょっとしたらだけど、レインは変な夢を見る自分が嫌だって心のどこかで思ってるから、それが無意識に自分じゃない自分を作り出してるのかなっていうの。どうすればいいの私。そうね。変な夢も全部受け止めるってできるから、受け止めるそう。聞きたくない声も、会いたくない自分も、しっかり見てみる。そいつらと仲良くなる。できないよ。声に耳を傾けるだけでいいと思うわ。何を言っているのか、どうしたいのか。レインが納得できるので、その正体を暴くの。怖い、私。でも、今まで大丈夫だったでしょレインはレインのままでしょそれとも、幽霊さんはレインのことを殴ったり、声が暴力振ったことはあったひょっとしたら、レインと仲良くなろうとしてるのかもしれないわ。ボス、また見えてるよ。見えなければ問題ないし、 痛く心構えって大事だと思うの。ああ、また来たかと思えば、気が楽じゃない。私、帰る。どうしたの？先生、なんか悪いこと言った？私、嘘なんかついてない。あれは、幽霊とかお化けじゃない。先生のバカ。ね。
Holy crap! I was at I really like wanted to speak during this one, but I held off and it paid off and it was worth it. So I was gonna say Toka initially brought up a very good point, and I feel like this is probably one of the best pieces of advice or things she said to Lane thus far. Is rather than because obviously Lane's been having issues regarding her own hallucinations and delusions, right? And it's something to where, again, she's kind of been trying to just get rid of them, right? Like as Toka put it, like run away from them. We kind of see that, right? Granted, again, this ties back to the last counseling where Toka kind of again talked about how she like viewed herself as a different person than what she was, and Lane just has kind of this other person within herself. But it's something to where again, like her bringing up, and this is probably the best thing she said to Lane thus far is to like again confront those rather than try and just get rid of them or run away to actually confront, what's kind of going on and kind of almost I don't want to say accept, but at least acknowledge that they are kind of a part of her and the experience that she's going through, right? To be her again. Mm. With her point being that, yeah, well, like if you're Lane, right, and these things are a part of you, then are you trying like it raised the question of are you trying to be a different person? Like again, or do you want to be you? Like she brought up that very good point. It's not like an arguing debate of sort banner. It's more like a different perspective and like again, kind of just also along with the practical reality that she's probably not going to be able to get rid of like again like we already know from fairly early on Toka only believed that or I guess yeah Dr. Toka because she's a doctor, right? She only believed that a normal life was only borderline possible at this point like that early on. So again, just it's something to where rather than the goal and focus being completely curing, and aiding in like that ailment, right? Or I guess treating that. Maybe it should be just kind of again, something to where like learning how to live in or cope with it as a part of yourself, right? In your own life experience. So that's probably, the most like I feel like that's the best thing she's told me thus far. But then of course, right, we get the second half of the conversation where she kind of drops the ball by talking about like ghosts and stuff. Because again, the problem with because obviously and again, this also goes back to where she has no real idea what's going on with Lane, right? Granted, she brought that great piece of advice for her, but still really has kind of no clue. I mean, it's something to where what she may view it as is ghost, right? But we know at the end of the day that Lane, at least from her own self and perspective, it's like because it's almost like mocking you in a sense. Let's say you're in Lane's shoes and you're having this problem, right? And your therapist, psychiatrist starts saying, talking about ghosts and stuff. Because we know it's not ghosts. Honestly, Toka should even know that, right? But it's something to where it's like it's just blatantly, reductive and like pretty much borderline like disrespectful to like reduce your problem down to like imaginary like ghosts, right? It's like when we know it's and that's why Lane's like because I feel like well obviously the first part of the conversation it's a hard one to have and to take in as Lane that maybe you might not be able to get rid of it. You kind of just have to I guess learn to live with it in a sense. But then the second part where it's just blatantly talking about like, oh, reducing your problems down to ghosts. It's like, yeah, why are you even there? Right. Like, and it's also interesting to note that this is the first time, like, there have been times where Late, didn't want to talk and or they just ended the session early for whatever reason. But I think this is probably the first time that like she's actually walked out on a session. I think that's very telling, right? But again, to me, this is like I'm really loving this game, man. Like I really like honestly, if the anime and show were much more about this, I think it'd be even better, right? Because what you do is you sacrifice the wired, right? Or at least, kind of that as a concept, but you get a much kind of more coherent story focused around the development progression of this one character, Lane, right? Going through the same issues. But I guess same issue with Yik, right? Is this immediately
ゲーム
following?
の私の発表彼女の現実的トークを私の主観的判断で仮想的な空想として一方的に表現してしまったためである。さらに不安を除くため、意図的に軽い調子でいったのは一層深くクライアントをしつけることだと。両親の経過報告、クライアントへの謝罪のこと、保護者同伴に来週。
Okay, this is interesting. One, again, she kind of acknowledges that she fucked up and dropped the ball, right? It's like, again, because I feel like even like, granted, so I consider myself to be a somewhat smart person. I feel like, at least when it comes to these type of like social, things, right? In social situations, I consider myself to be like, I'm not going to say I'm like a fucking genius, right? But I consider myself to be like somewhat knowledgeable and relatively smart when it comes to stuff like this. A big thing, is again, just not like devaluing what the other person's experiencing, right? And that's kind of what ended up happening here, no matter how old they are, right? Treat them as if they're a fucking adult, right? Because I'm like, dude, like I remember back when I was 12, I was in what, seventh grade? Because I make the whole comparison with Omori, right? I was in seventh grade, right? Again, it was nice, like at least like the big thing, because that was when I went to DC right on the class trip, and I was actually treated like somewhat like an adult. Granted, chaperone, right? Teachers everywhere, like stuff like that, supervisors, but like still, actually kind of being on my own and then like, going like kind of taking care of myself for that period. Like, it was nice, and, like, even though Lane's kinda going through some issues, it's still so, like, for example, I'm a young adult right now, I'm 22, right? Like, 22 really ain't that old, just like 27 really ain't that old, right? What would you call it? But it's something where now I'm, like, legally an adult and pretty much, like yeah, I'm pretty much, like, I'd say comfortably that I'm an adult by this point, right? I mean, I'm living on my own at my own work. Still rely on my parents for some stuff, which I'm grateful for, right? That's the one thing I've learned is that, what would you call it? I feel like that's the one thing pretty much almost everyone, unless you have like a terrible like family and home life, which then it's like can't really do anything about that. But it's like, it wouldn't make sense for you to reminisce on that, right? But because that's Stockholm syndrome. But the big thing there is yeah, what would you call it? For me, I'm like the more as I grow older, right? Or the more separation, the more I realize how much my parents did for me. But that's besides the point. The big thing, and speaking of parents, right? I feel like an interesting part of that conversation is the fact that she needs, because obviously, here's what I'd say. Like, again, because the question is, because in the show, it's kind of debatable whether Lane's parents are her parents, right? In this, it's like, okay, it seemingly took the approach that they are her, like, that again, she's a normal kid and that they are her parents. She's just kind of going through it was like savant syndrome or something. But again, and this is very interesting. And I actually, yeah, this is kind of, like maybe we look back on this point and see, that this was up to something. But the fact that, Toka needs to kind of report into Lane's parents, give like a status report there, I find is very interesting, especially since granted may need to deal with kind of, the ties and or tribulations of her treating her as a therapist rather than a psychiatrist, right? Being a more like permanent, like long-term, but also more informal, casual, like relationship, but again, I find that to be very interesting. So oh yeah, let's go to wait, what? All right, so hold on, let's go. Let's go at Toka's diary, and then we'll do the R lab. Again, we're just going bottom to top because we know this is, pretty much chronological, right? We figured that out. That wasn't a I'll see. Hold on, let me save too. So I keep forgetting. I'm just worried about like my computer crashing. Yeah, Toko's diary. Let's see. Oh, look at Lain.
プレゼント、誕生日プレゼントと、ちょっと早いバレンタインデー。
Oh, is she about to get her heart broken, bruh?
これ、お母さんと二人で作ったんだよ。先生、紅茶が好きって言ってたから。なんだかその時は、つい目頭がちっときちゃった。単なるクライアントからもらって感激してどうするのと思う。だってその誕生日プレゼントがなかった。
Bruh. This oh, that's hilarious.
そうしたことで泣いたり落ち込んだりして。
It's just dump his ass, bro. Uh
でも、レインは私の誕生日なんてなんでしてたんだろう。私教えたってまあ、いっか、そんなこと。でも、女の子からプレゼントをもらうなんて初めてだし。
little sus, little sus.
レイン、
Oh, oh my god, dude. Freaking dude. Toka's fucking breaking down, dog. She's going through it. She's not having a great time. She's kind of breaking apart, right? Breaking down. Again, Takeshi not giving her the birthday present. Her game one from Lain. Again, even acknowledging that she's getting attached to, again, getting so attached and emotional over her first client, Lain, right? Obviously, it's just a combination of kind of like factors. The first one, the fact that she is the way she is like a client, right? Probably most fucking difficult client to deal with. But then also kind of not really caring, right? That I mean, she's just salty or sad that, Takeshi didn't give her a gift, right? And that, she's kind of losing it. And the big part being again, how did Lain know it was her birthday, right? That's what I'm saying, Lain like freaking like genius, like extremely competent in her own right. Something to where, yeah, but yeah, Toka's freaking losing it. Again, just but we kind of knew that this was the inevitable direction that things would head in. I think we all kind of knew that this is the direction that it would head in, right? Just again, inexperienced psychologist, like, inexperienced therapist dealing with Elaine, not a good combo. And again, it's going to be interesting to see the last Toka logs, right? I feel like that's probably part I'm looking forward to most is seeing how they end, right? And kind of what because Lain is like 150 fucking logs, right? She does them till the end, but so yeah, let's do 17.
母さん、すみませんでした。あとは大丈夫ですんで。レイン、ごめんね。こうでもしなければ、レインがもう先生と会ってくれそうもなかったから。一言謝りたかったの。ごめんなさい。先生勝手に決めつけちゃってたね。でも、レインに納得してもらって安心してほしかったの。レインがそういうことなんだって自分で納得できたら。
Not wrong, not wrong. The problem is calling them a ghost.
ごめんなさい。レイン、嘘ついてた。本当は 日記つけてなかったの？いいのよ。だって、先生、レインの自由にしてって言ったじゃない。トウコさんは、レインのためを思って言ってくれたの。ありがとう。そう思ってくれるだけで嬉しいわ。じゃあ、先生のこと許してくれるの？うん。よかった。レインが帰ってから、先生なんか悲しくなっちゃって、涙が出てきたの。すごく辛くて、嫌われちゃったことが。トウコさん、